Ahoy, everybody. I am here to, I guess, go over the results of the Alberta by election. Sorry for being a little bit late, folks. We are going to be tracking this all on the Elections Alberta website. They actually have a really good little reporting thing right here for us to watch. And it's probably, I don't know, it's going to be interesting. I've been predicting that we're going to have the UCP win Edmonton Ellerslie. But then the other one we're going to be tracking tonight is down here. It is Old Didsbury Three Hills. Edmonton Strathcona is going to go NDP. It's literally the oldest NDP seat in Alberta. Literally, back when the NDP only won like 2 to 3 seats in every election. That was the one that they would win. Like Grant Notley, Rachel Notley's father had that seat before she had it, and now it's going to Nenshi. Again, you could a glass of water with the NDP label on it would win Edmonton Strathcona, but Ellerslie, that's a riding that back in like 2012 the PCs used to win. In Old Didsbury Three Hills, that's a super conservative riding. But why that one's interesting is, of course, we have the RPA here, which is the Republican Party of Alberta, who in like the first 2 out of 60 polls counted. We already have 27 votes RPA, 108 for the UCP, which is actually not too bad of a result for them. Like, what percentage is that if I add that all up? So out of 150 votes, they have like 18% of the vote so far, which I think is around enough for them to pretend that they're successful. We'll get more into that as we go, but right now we have effectively very few votes counted. But yeah, this is what by-elections are always like. It's just very boring, not much being counted. Anyways, okay. So how is everybody doing? Why is this just started? That it was 43 minutes ago. Did I miss a bunch? No, you did not. I literally started about 43 seconds ago. Provincial election coming up in Newfoundland, praying Tony Wakeman and the PCs win. I have honestly not been following that very closely, so I will look into it. A funny thing is, Newfoundland and Labrador, in a lot of ways, has become a lot like Alberta in the sense that it's an oil and gas province now, so even the Liberals have to be somewhat pro oil and gas out there. Eh, And no, this is not the by-election for Pierre Poilievre. I saw some people bringing up. I actually couldn't remember the riding name earlier when I made a video today. It's Battle River Crowfoot. I don't know. I think I was thinking Battlefords, which is in Saskatchewan, and for some reason I couldn't get that out of my mind. I didn't say it wrong. I knew I didn't know it, so I admitted it. But yeah. HUD says, are we going to see a federal election in under 2 years, in your opinions? I think potentially. It depends on what happens because obviously the main 2 players in calling the election are going to be the Liberals themselves and the NDP. The Bloc Québécois, I think, are perfectly happy to have an election whenever because I think they want to win back territory. So if the Liberals mess up, they're perfectly fine pulling the plug. I think the NDP, as much as I think Don Davies is a twit, just as basically most NDP leaders tend to be across the country, I think he, as a former Teamsters lawyer, understands that if you're going to run the NDP, then your main goal is getting more seats for the NDP. That doesn't sound shocking, but it's just, it's shocking from the perspective that for however long, from 2019 or 2018 until 2025, Jagmeet Singh ran the NDP to basically keep the Liberals in. It was stupid. If you're, again, I don't like the NDP at all, but if you're going to be the NDP leader, you pull the plug on the Liberals whenever you have the advantage to gain seats. That's what Jack Layton did in 2004, 2008, 2011, and probably would have done it again if he hadn't died. But that's where you need to, like, if you're running a party, your goal is to get more power for your party. If you have a goal other than that, you shouldn't be running a party. Marco Perusa says for $5 in a super chat, How does Pierre need to adjust his message now that he's running against a Harper-style conservative with a liberal caucus support, aka Mark Carney? And that's not actually a bad way of phrasing that. And again, thank you for the $5 super chat, Marco. I think that, yeah, I keep repeating it in videos. Hopefully you guys don't get tired of it. Mark Carney is not a flashy guy. He's not going to, if he succeeds, it's going to be in a way that he makes middle class people who voted for him in this last election comfortable enough to stick with him. And so if there's a new election called, if he's doing a good enough job from a liberal perspective, he can hold on to his voters. And then I would say that at the same time, because he's not flashy, he's not going to blow up on the tarmac, explode on the tarmac the way Trudeau did. And so that means, as I've been saying, if Poilievre wants to win, they can't run what I would consider a very safe campaign like they did this last time. The Conservatives have been running safe campaigns for 4 elections straight. And when I say safe, the funny thing is safe doesn't mean you're going to win. It just means that you don't take risks by speaking out on certain topics. I keep saying, and I know so many people disagree with me, if the Conservatives would run a little pro-life, it would actually help. Obviously, if they ran more severely against taxes and regulations and immigration, they would also do better. But to be clear, it would be very intelligent for them to run a little pro-life, because guess what? The Conservative Party base has nothing to do with the people who show up and cheer for Poilievre at rallies. Those are pure Poilievre fans. They might also be base conservatives as well. People have been voting conservative for 30 years. But when I say they're not the base, your base is the biggest portion of your vote that you can pretty much guarantee if you're doing things right. And those people, I would always stereotype. A stereotypical conservative voter historically is someone between the ages of 50 and 70, Baptists or Presbyterian people who are pro-life, want lower taxes, they care about fiscal responsibility. And if you actually speak out on some of those issues, if you talk about lowering immigration significantly, if you introduce some things restricting maid or assisted suicide, or have some small pro-life legislation, they're going to turn out in rates of 80 to 90%, rather than in this last election where I think those base conservatives turned out at 75%, 70%. It matters when turnout matters, and you need to say certain things to your base to make sure they turn out. Where when certain MPs like Arnold Viersen, who's a great pro-life MP up in northern Alberta, when he seemed to be sidelined because he said pro-life things on a pro-life podcast, who could imagine a pro-life MP may say something pro-life on a pro-life podcast? When he was silenced and basically it went around that conservatives are now being told don't say anything pro-life, you made, Bill and Jane a little less likely. Those 60-year-old pro-life Christians, you made them a little bit less likely to show up. And so that group, although they show up and vote conservative consistently, they didn't show up in the numbers that you would normally want. Canadian Classic Silver said PPC platform items, Wyatt, you had your chance. The PPC had its chance. Running on the right things doesn't mean you're doing it right. It just means that you have a website that the Christian Heritage Party has had all the right policies. I haven't read all of them, but in my opinion, the Christian Heritage Party has a lot of great policies. That doesn't mean they're doing the right things to get elected. Maxime Bernier is not a serious candidate. He just had a leadership review where only like 3,000 people voted, and he only got 79% of their support, and now he's going to stay on. And when I say only 79%, that's insane, because the PPC is effectively a badly run cult. And somehow he still only can get 79% of his own people to vote for him, and most of their membership has just dissolved. It doesn't matter. I don't care what's on their website. What you say is your platform is supplementary to how serious you are at actually getting that platform implemented. I could start the Wyatt Claypool Party where, surprise, surprise, it's super conservative and I agree with 100% of it. But if I'm not actually going to run in every riding, and if I'm not going to actually put up serious campaigns, you should think I'm insulting your intelligence by putting up all these great things on my website, and then I'm going to sit back and say, oh, I really shook the camera there. If I just sat back and said, people should elect me, and if they don't, they're idiots because I have the best platform. But anyways, Space Dave 2000 for $2 says, sorry, but Gen Z was disenfranchised the last election. Well, in part because Gen Z didn't show up, and I'm Gen Z, and I got a little bit annoyed that Gen Z was like sluggish, but maybe this is where the conservatives should have been taking more, risks on doing things on podcasts and going on TikTok and whatnot. I don't like TikTok, but the party should probably be on it pretty consistently. Adam Romero says, I think pro-life would likely turn away a lot of swing voters. I think that it would only solidify people who were already voting conservative rather than attract new support. You would be wrong because there's a lot of, I would call, upper middle class retired people who vote liberal because it seemed like the patriotic option this time around. They don't really notice a big difference between the conservatives and the liberals on a lot of issues, but they like the temperament of Carney because he's calm. But know how you actually get those people jarred out of voting that way? You say, that guy's party literally voted against upgraded sentencing for murdering pregnant women. We're going to implement that if we get government. We're going to absolutely hammer on criminals who kill pregnant women. If you do that, you will gain a lot of their support. If you confront Carney on the debate stage and you say, why is your party against banning sex selective abortion? Killing a child because of what sex it is, and for some reason the family doesn't want it that way. That would put the Carney liberals in a very weird position where now these, mild temperamented, older voters who are the people who are guaranteed to probably watch the debates, if they see that, they'll be like, what's wrong with Mark? Just say you're against it. If you ran on getting men out of women's sports, and that was a really big thing that you emphasize consistently, you would get a lot of, again, those mild-tempered people who just watch their granddaughter, in a race or something like that, or they just watched their hockey team, and then they realize the Carney's liberals aren't willing to get males out of their sports. You would get so many people showing up to slam dunk ballots in the ballot box for the conservatives because they hate that sort of thing. And this is where I find a lot of conservatives can sometimes be almost self-deceived a little bit. You are convinced that would be, and I'm not saying this in like any jab at somebody, but don't let yourself be taken in. If you talk to 80% of people, they probably agree with you on certain things around gender theory and pro-life issues. Sex selective abortion polls at more than 80% approval in terms of banning it. Same thing with a lot of these other minor pro-life policies. Late-term abortion bans would be super popular. Don't listen to the mainstream media saying, women aren't going to like that. What women are they talking to? Women are disproportionately pro-life compared to men. It would actually be a big win to do that. 25% of Canadians are hardcore pro-life. And then up to 80% are somewhat pro-life depending on the policy you propose. Again, it's very smart to do this, but I'm just going to do this last super chat. I'm going to answer. By the way, guys, you do not have to super chat things for me to answer questions. I will answer questions I see come up. If I don't answer your questions, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's just tons of stuff come up. Marco Prusa says for $2, do you think Carney makes non-tariff deal with Donald Trump? Potentially. I'm not sure if Trump's going to move off of the baseline 10%. If he gets some deal that benefits Canada, obviously he will benefit politically. This is, again, why the Conservatives need to run on a really big vision that basically wants big changes on taxes and regulations and immigration and culture issues. If they do that, they can kind of sidestep these small Carney wins that he's going to get. If Carney is the one who ends up basically fumbling the deal by being too aggressive on, well, I'm going to protect the dairy industry, I think you're actually going to tick off a lot of Canadians saying, I thought you were the deal maker. You can't do it this way. Some random Albertan says, what are the by-election results? Well, we are getting to that. And also I'll maybe mention that Megan Sky Phoenix says, whatever happened to the defamation case against you? It's ongoing. The guy suing me, Ted Joe, you can go look up Ted Joe in the Globe and Mail. There's a whole article about him, which he's suing us for merely referencing in another article. He ended up having his own legal team apparently quit on him, and he's had to get a new legal team. And so everything is just chaotic, but it's good for us. So in Edmonton, Strathcona, we see here Nenshi has 608 votes. We have the Alberta Party 5 votes, 13 for the Libs. Republican Party of Alberta 7, UCP 75. This is not at all surprising. I guarantee you the UCP borderline put no effort into that riding because, again, it's so default NDP. It would be like the NDP trying hard in Didsbury Three Hills. They did not try here. That's why they only have 59 votes. And the Republican Party of Alberta has 55 votes, UCP 213. I'm going to say if the Republican Party of Alberta comes in third place here, that is probably going to spell the end of their donor base, because really what this is the Republican Party of Alberta expecting to win Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills? Not at all. There is not a chance that they are going to win that one. The problem is that if they don't do well enough, the people willing to give them money and volunteer to grow the party are going to say, what's the point? They only got 10% and they seem to dump tons of resources in this area. Another interesting one, guys, is Edmonton Ellerslie. Again, the old Progressive Conservative Party won this riding back in 2013. Ever since then, it's been a pretty NDP riding. Last election with Rod La Jolla, who is a full-on communist, like not even exaggerating, is an identified pro-Marxist socialist. That guy got 61% of the vote last election. Right now, it's only 3 out of 55 polls reporting, but it's 71 NDP to 42 UCP. Early going, it could tighten up. If the UCP win that, it's a major coup for them. Even if they get close, it's very good, because remember, the last election results were extremely good for the NDP, and if it gets tight, that is a really bad that's a really sorry, I'm looking up the Edmonton Ellerslie riding results, but if it becomes close, that's a massive issue for the NDP, that their new leader is actually causing them to start becoming putting them at risk in Edmonton. That's a big problem. So I'm just looking up in 2023 to give you the exact numbers. Rod La Jolla for the NDP had gotten 61.75% of the vote, and Ranjit Bath for the UCP got 36.83. So I would say if, let's say Danielle Smith can get the UCP in that riding up till, let's say, like 45%, that's looking really good. 9% improvement in the city of Edmonton, where the UCP do not win any seats. Very good. And if the Republican Party of Alberta then comes below, let's say if the Republican Party of Alberta comes below 20%, that's not very good. If they come below 15%, they're dead. If above 20%, they can maybe make the argument to a lot of separatists in Alberta, pro-independent Albertans, that they are the proper vehicle to be voting for in a provincial election. I'm going to try and remain pretty neutral on that. And Jaron Swickle says, go Naheed Nenshi. He needs to be the premier of Alberta and send Smith packing. Well, sorry, Jaron, but the person who is most likely to prevent Nenshi from getting into office is Nenshi himself. Helen says, we need someone to do what Charlie Kirk did for the U.S. election. Well, that's honestly what I'm kind of attempting to do with my own website. It's very early going because I'm like one guy. I'll drop the link in the description below if you guys want to sign up. There's like over 1,000 people watching. WyattClaypool.com, sort of like CharlieKirk.com or freedom@CharlieKirk.com. What I'm trying to do is make sure I gather as many pieces of data as possible on my website. So if nominations come up around the country, like with Charlie Kirk and TPUSA, I can start pointing people towards really good candidates in nominations that are going to guarantee conservative wins for the right policies and reasons. I don't want the Conservatives to win just for the Conservatives to win. I want the Conservatives to win to do good things. It's like why in Ontario I back the new Blue Party of Ontario. Doug Ford sucks. He is not even an improvement over Kathleen Wynne. He is merely turning the Kathleen Wynne Liberal Party color blue. They aren't doing anything. Even the other day, when he was finally going after band councils, Doug Ford, he then walks it back within the same day and says, "Oh, I'm kidding. Oh, I apologize. I was being rude." It's like, why apologize? You were right. Band councils are deeply corrupt across Canada, taking massive amounts of money, do not support their own people, and then they come, like he said, hat in hand, looking for more money to support their really bad spending habits. Space Dave 2000 for $2 says Alberta has shifted disturbingly left in 20 years. And sort of, I think it's the culture of the country in general. 20 years ago, or especially 25 years ago, the Liberals federally were cutting spending. We had spending cuts in British Columbia under the BC Liberals. We had, of course, Ralph Klein's paying off the debt in Alberta. I think the entire country, especially on a fiscal level, has moved more big government. L. Robertson says, Nenshi wasn't exactly a star in Calgary, so don't understand why Strathcona thinks he would be any better. to Nenshi for premier either. Again, it's just that it's simply a very easy riding to win if you're the NDP. It is a default riding, which kind of looked pathetic that they put him in Strathcona and they didn't have him run, I guess, in Ellerslie. That would have been more. I think that would have been more of a statement that he can win swing ridings. Ellerslie isn't exactly a swing riding, it is a safer NDP riding, but in theory, it could be lost. If he ran there, it would demonstrate he has some, he has some sort of fortitude. Nenshi is that's the funny thing about Nenshi. He talks tough, but he's an absolute coward in practice, and that's why he ran there. Someone is calling me a glowy shill. I guess I'm a federal shill or some sort of I'm a CSIS agent or whatever. Also, the funny thing with Danielle Smith is I will criticize Danielle Smith. I literally voted against her in the leadership review in 2024 or 2024. Not because I hate her or anything like that. I would actually vote in favor of her in a new leadership review, but at the time they hadn't lowered taxes. There was a lot of overspending in a lot of areas, and I don't like their current budget. But at least they cut taxes, and that was my red line. If you guys cut taxes, I'll get back on side. And they did that, and I would like them to do better on many files. But overall, they've at least made some improvements. They got rid of certain people in cabinet, shifted them to lower level positions who were big into DEI stuff. That's good, but yeah. Scotty says you should change the name of your channel, maybe Wyatt Works or something like that. I just keep it National Telegraph because it's always been that way, and in general, I'm not, it's better for branding. It's harder to sell Wyatt merchandise because I feel like that's weird to like get people to like wear Wyatt merch if I ever sell stuff. Although I don't have any at the moment, but here's some updates on the election results in the by-elections in Alberta. So in Edmonton, Ellerslie top line, NDP 364, UCP 205, Libs 26, Republican Party 222. Strathcona, NDP 1037, UCP 142. Again, not really worth looking at. And in Old Didsbury 3 Hills, it's 576 to 180 for the Republicans. So UCP leading the Republicans 180, NDP coming up the rear with 163. Again, I am interested mostly to see if Edmonton Ellerslie can be won by the UCP. I was predicting that they could potentially win this riding. If not, sucks, I guess. But again, this is still a big improvement overall. Sways says EB is a serious concern, though. He knows he's the reason for no investment. It's like the mob style shakedown. And you're right. In BC, EB recently said, "Oh, I'm fine with a pipeline. It just needs to be fully privately funded." And that would be fine, but provincial and federal taxes and regulations suck, which means that it's incredibly difficult to get private funding together for a pipeline. Plus, EB and Mark Carney are basically saying, okay, but you also still have to go through the Indigenous consultations and environmental consultations, and you have to follow all these other regulations, blah, blah, blah. And so no private company is going to invest because the only reason a business case doesn't exist is because the government makes it borderline impossible to actually have a, pipeline or some oil and gas or mining project that is profitable within the vision of even the long term. It is like the extreme long term these things would be profitable. Again, not because they're bad projects. It's because it's not because these are bad projects that they're not getting funding. It's because they are like actively being held down by the government. It's like when you pay as a business like 25% corporate taxes or whatever, 33% corporate taxes in Canada, plus you pay business taxes on a provincial level, plus income taxes are high, plus regulations are high. Nothing there's no business case for anything except these guys dump subsidies into green projects, which there's definitely no business case for because they don't exist without both the tax credits and direct subsidies. Valerie Keefe says selective regulatory holidays equal subsidies. Take some econ glowy. I'm not sure what this person's on about. Mega Mug says, "What is the point of the Wild Rose Loyalty Coalition, in your opinion, Wyatt?" And yes, the Rose Loyalty Coalition is what you'll see on the right there. And I don't think there's any point. I think it's just Paul Hinman's passion project party, in which not even passion project, just like grudge party. He doesn't like the UCP, and he doesn't like any of the other people in the independence movement. Like a lot of the guys, here's the thing, having a small party, and I'm not against small parties, but just because someone's running a small party doesn't mean they're humble. You can get some massive narcissists running small parties. I think I got a sign for one of the small parties in BC back during the election. It was the Freedom Party. Again, badly run, but the guy who runs it believes he's like Napoleon. It's obnoxious. Valerie says, soulless propagandist, ignore actual news. Feign non understanding and take another jab. Yeah, because your messages are broken up, don't make much sense, and give me nothing to work with here. I'm not even sure what this last message meant with the selective regulatory holidays. I know that like regulatory, like giving out subsidies, like subsidies come in many forms: direct cash subsidies and then tax cut subsidies. Like, we are going to let your company pay less taxes than everyone else. That is obviously a subsidy. I don't know what you're on about. Saul Goodman says it appears the NDP has won the Ellerslie by-election. The UCP hasn't won a single poll station. At the same time, though, it's only 11 out of 55 or so. They could always catch up. It's 340 to 521. Yeah, that's a decent margin. So that is going to, that, like, if that maintains across the poll stations, they will win. I guess in the last 44, the UCP are going to start winning several of them by wider margins. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, the UCP is also winning the old Didsbury Three Hills by-election. The Republican Party, I want to see what this is actually amounting to in terms of its percentage. I'm not the best at quick math, so I'm pulling out my calculator here. They're currently running at 19% of the vote. So if the Republican Party is able to maintain that kind of a margin, they may be able to hold on to what current support they have because they can walk away and say, look, we had 20% of the vote, and you can't sneeze at 20%. The UCP is currently winning a large majority of the vote here. Everyone else's votes combined doesn't even come close to theirs. But still, it's all about perception effectively at this point. Damage 142 says, how is that different than Pierre in Battle River? I'm not, I assume you just mean in terms of the by-elections. These are provincial by-elections for the legislature between the UCP and the NDP. I believe it's called right away, the Battle River Crowfoot by-election federally to get Pierre Poilievre back into parliament. That will probably be happening in terms of election day sometime in early to mid-August. So I believe if it was called like as of a couple days ago, it would have been on August 6th. I don't think they've officially called it yet. And so once they do, though, once they do call the by-election, it's like, I think, a standardized amount of time away of like 35 days or something like that. There's some standard amount of minimum time. And I think in a by-election like that, I think they'll just schedule it to come as fast as possible. So by the fall session, Poilievre will be back in charge in Parliament as the leader. J-Man just sends in $2 as super chat. Thank you for that, J-Man. And Knight of Philema says, did that clown Nenchi win? Absolutely. He ran himself in the safest of safe ridings because he couldn't win anywhere because he was scared of not winning anywhere else. J Man 2 says I paid $2, so I'm Boo Nenshi. I guess he was probably. I assume you did. You just didn't end up attaching your message, but yeah, Boo Nenshi. Um, the Cat in the Hat says John Rustad and David Eby are working together. BC is fallen. It's Here's the thing. I don't, and I'm somebody, full disclosure, who works for One BC, the new political party in the legislature. Is John Rustad and David Eby working together? No. It's that John Rustad and his inner circle in the BC Conservative Party is running what is, or what I would characterize as, a limp BC United like party where they mildly oppose the NDP. The main things that the BC Conservatives under Rustad oppose the David Eby and the NDP on are the most obvious things. Oh, they took away funding for the medication for a 11-year-old cancer patient. That's obviously bad. The BC Ferries thing is obviously bad. Hospital closures is obviously bad. Any party would be criticizing that stuff. At the same time, they will then reflexively attack the NDP for stuff they're not even necessarily doing that's wrong because they're unwilling to touch other issues that they think are too controversial for them to touch, even if they ran on some of them. So the things that like the Rustad BC Conservatives won't touch is like DRIPA, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. It's a bad act. It basically allows for Indigenous bands to enforce, like, to block projects on title land, and it uses a very expansive definition of what title land is. There isn't even actually that much title land in BC, but DRIPA is kind of falling mostly in line with UNDRIP, which basically says anything that's historical territory could be considered some title land. So you have these bands who have massive, like literally the Wet'suwet'en, for an example, they are their title land that they have designated themselves as being original lands of themselves. It is larger than the territory of the country of Montenegro. It is almost as big as Sardinia, that large Italian island in the Mediterranean Sea. It's ridiculous, and that's what the current law in BC is. John Rustad has personally said he'd vote to repeal DRIPA, but the problem is that he says then he will let policy be guided by UNDRIP, which is in fact what DRIPA is based off of, and UNDRIP is actually worse than DRIPA. And then on a podcast I just heard today, Angelo Isidoro, the executive director of the BC Conservatives, said that we want to have free votes in caucus, and I agree with generally having free votes in a caucus of a party outside of fundamental policy questions that as a candidate you signed on to run for. So if you're running for a Conservative Party and we're running on a 5% across the board tax cut, and then suddenly you show up and you say I want to do it, okay, you have to do it. That's one of those things where you can't, when it's a major plank, you can't just say I disagree with it after the fact. But Angelo said, oh, we'll have a free vote on DRIPA. And then the host of the show he was on, Mo Amir, who is no conservative, he's a lefty, he even said, sorry, is DRIPA not a fundamental issue? It was part of your guys' platform. Angelo acknowledges it. And when he says, so no, you're not going to force people to vote to drop DRIPA? And then Angelo says, I'll let John determine that, or that's for the leader to decide. What the heck? That's not for the leader to decide. That's what you guys ran on, and now it's suddenly up to a free vote on whether we're even gonna stick to what we said. So that was my rant on that. I'm trying to. Bob Klatt said, imagine Nenshi trying to run in Calgary, lol. Well, he could have, in theory, run in Calgary, Buffalo, because I know Joe Ceci there is older, is not going to run for re-election again. So there was speculation if he was going to run in Buffalo, which is downtown Calgary. But the problem is in the NDP caucus, because of, frankly, Nenshi's very toxic personality, he didn't want to step down for Nenshi. So that's why Nenshi went to Edmonton. Although even in Buffalo, I wonder if he'd be too scared of having a bad performance in Buffalo. So he wanted Notley's old riding of Strathcona instead. But that's hilarious. Nenshi is such a difficult, toxic person to work with that they wouldn't step down. And okay, I had to catch up with some of this stuff. Damaged 142 says, sorry, I meant in relation to the NDP leader. Both he and Pierre are running a safe riding, so your argument could be used against Pierre too. Um, he was saying that as a supplementary to him saying, how is that different than what Pierre in Battle River? The difference with Pierre running in a super safe conservative seat compared to Nenshi is that Nenshi had other options, and he's been sort of waiting quite a while in order to get step back into the legislature. Whereas Polyev, there's no open seat for him to run in. There's no natural open seat. Rob La Jolla resigned to run for the Liberals. Then he actually got kicked out as a Liberal nominee because he's such a crazy person. He could have run in Ellerslie, but Nenshi didn't want to take that option and ran for the safest seat possible. And he hasn't even been doing anything to try and get an NDP MLA to step down in, Falcon Ridge in Calgary or somewhere else where they've won the riding, in the sense that he seemed to be angling for the easiest seat possible. Ray Gunn for $6.99 says, keep up the good work. I enjoy your coverage. Keep up the good work. I enjoy your coverage. You did that twice probably to fill up the text allowance you had for $6.99, but thank you for that. Leaf Buzz B says for $2, I've heard NDP and BC Cons want to replace leaders. Wouldn't shock me. The BC Conservatives do have a caucus meeting this Wednesday, and it could be pretty bad for Rusted because, again, with the AGM scandal, there's a lot of donors and volunteers leaving them. Again, Angelo Isidoro on the Mo Amir show on Czech News, Vancouver's, he said, well, nobody actually in the general public cares about any of these issues that the one BC guys, Dallas Brody and Tara Armstrong, are bringing up, but they kind of do. Does the general public care? No, the general public doesn't care about most political issues because most political issues tend to be pretty obscure. It's the whole generic. They care about kitchen table stuff, really big proposed policy changes they'll care about. But the people who care about the AGM stuff, who care about the fact that John Rusted is letting all the woke United people run the party, is the volunteers and donors of the BC Conservatives. And he even admitted, John, on another podcast, Mike Smith's show, that the party is having a problem with donations in the second quarter of 2025 because, again, they have not really done a lot to incentivize people to they've not done a lot to incentivize people to donate because the party is breaking all of its promises. It's actually not even against Soji anymore. They just want inappropriate materials removed from libraries, and not even as like a command, but let's have a committee meet to review some of the books in the libraries and decide if they should be there or not. That is so weak, it's insane. Even BC United probably would have asked for a little bit more than that. But Eleanor Sturko is not conservative. And so while saying she's against how bad Soji is, she only means that she doesn't like the openly pornographic books in the class, in the libraries, and that's it, which is a symptom of Soji. Soji 123 is not just that. It's teaching gender theory in the classroom under the guise of anti-bullying policy. It's doing a lot of identity politics stuff that's not good for kids. There's tons of stuff in BC schools that needs to be removed. And frankly, across the country, there's tons of things in the curriculum and in other supplementary programming in schools that needs to be gutted. And I don't just want it to be like Eleanor Sturko puts it in the sense that, or in the verbiage of age appropriate. This stuff isn't appropriate at all. There's nothing age appropriate about this stuff that if it was moved up to high school only, it'd be okay. No. This stuff is inappropriate. You should be fired if you brought in one of these books like Genderqueer into your office because it's just gross. There's nothing about it that's educational. Anyway, so someone said, where is Falcon Ridge? Calgary Falcon Ridge is a riding in Northeast Calgary, currently held by MLA Bopari, who is an NDP Calistani guy. He's a nutcase. The Cat in the Hat says, you certainly have my family support. I hope you do great, Wyatt. Well, thank you. And for a full disclosure, I also basically make nothing to work for one BC in the legislature. I literally only make $25,000 a year, which is like basically it's below bare minimum. I'm just doing that because, I can't do everything for free, and having to fly out to BC disrupts content, disrupts other things I'm doing. But I specifically took basically nothing. Because the thing is that legislative offices have budgets, and I was talking to other people on the One BC team, and they were even like, you can take like you can take way more than that. Not like an inappropriate amount of money, but you should take probably more than 25K. And I was like, no, because I know the conservatives are going to try and attack me or how much I make, and it will be hilarious when they do and they find out I don't even make that much. Some people are saying no results, and I am going to bring up the results once again because I've been kind of holding them back a little bit because you don't need to check them every 5 seconds. But obviously, you see here NDP easily winning Strathcona, not a surprise. Edmonton Ellerslie is probably pulling away for the NDP here, 978 for the NDP to 667 for the UCP. And then in Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills, we now actually have the Republican Party of Alberta falling behind even the NDP and the UCP, clearly cleaning up over there. It looks like we are actually starting to hit the bigger polling stations now. That's always the problem. Earlier on in the night for any election, you're mostly going to be getting the results from some of the smaller polling stations first, which sometimes means when it comes to somewhere like Edmonton Ellerslie, you're getting like certain apartment buildings. Sometimes an apartment building itself is its own polling station because, in theory, like 1,000 people live there, so it just has its own polling station. And then you're starting to get more of the suburban areas later on the night. That's where there is still a chance that it could tighten up more for the UCP in Ellerslie from here. Someone says Calgary and Edmonton fight. Well, and that's basically what all Alberta elections are these days. And I'm going to quickly jump down because, again, I have to get through Super Chat, so I'm not ignoring people. Jeffy Maximo says BC is in an uncontrollable tailspin right now, hoping those reactional conservatives cross the floor and join one BC. The flip of the next election would be glorious. And thank you for the $13.99 Super Chat. And that's the problem, is that BC is in a terrible position right now. This is the time to run on major reform, and that's why it's so weird to see the Conservatives and Rusted every step of the way being like, let's do less. Let's take on less controversial issues. Let's just highlight the easy stuff, like, oh, there's wait times are super high. That's a problem, but they're not actually proposing the real reforms you need to change that. Do you know what you should do? This is the same thing that needs to be done in every single province across Canada. Take your admin budget or BC Health or Alberta Health or Ontario, take it and slash it. Take your administration, HR, management budget and cut it by 30%. And then move like 25% of the 30%, so like most of it, and then just put it to front lines. Hiring more nurses, moving people from admin and management who are certified nurses back to the front lines, and increasing nurse pay. I don't mind actually massively increasing nurse pay if it gets more people working front lines. And what you also have to do is slash overtime. Right now in Alberta and BC, there's kind of a bit of a scheme that goes on because the front lines are so understaffed. I can't blame people. You're being overworked. Why not do it this way? People will work part-time, quote unquote. And then when the hospitals get overwhelmed, nurses start getting called up who are at home saying, we will give you time and a half if you show up right now for an 8-hour shift. And the person will be like, no, I don't have time. Hang up. They'll get a call back. We'll give you double. No. And then they'll hang up. We'll give you double and a half. We'll just give you like 200%, 225% of your normal wage to show up right now. And then they'll show up. I'm not sure if it's exactly that much, but people make almost most of their money. Some nurses make most of their money from overtime in Alberta simply because they'll pay you a lot to show up because the system is so overburdened right now. And it's not because of, it's underfunded. Alberta's healthcare system is more funded than any healthcare system in the country, and it has some of the longest wait times because the money is not being used correctly. It doesn't matter what the budget is; it matters how that budget is being used. If you slash in Alberta, you could probably slash administration by 45%, and you could improve the system. Take that money, move it to nurses. If you're a registered nurse working in HR, you're not anymore. You are now working on the front line. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, you're fired then because it's a healthcare system. It is not a DEI, HR, hugs and pat system where we're going to pay you $120,000 a year to do mental health surveys of staff. Their mental health is bad because you're not helping work at the front lines. My goodness. Scotty for $5 says, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on Carney's role in Canada's managed decline and the Oracle's new doc, The Agenda. I have not watched the Oracle's new documentary. But I would say that it is that is one of the frustrating things about what's going on in Canada right now. Carney is able to pivot himself a little bit to pretend that he's like a breath of fresh air for the country. At the same time, so many voters seem to be unaware that he was literally the economic advisor for 5 years and totally owns a lot of the stuff going on right now. He was in favor of the carbon tax. He was in favor of all of the increase in capital gains inclusion rates. He was in favor of the restrictions on new oil and gas projects. He was there for all of it. He could have advised Trudeau differently. I guarantee Trudeau basically listened to him hook, line, and sinker. And he is seemingly now he's pretending that he's different. And if the problem though for the Conservatives, if Carney truly acts differently, he will maintain his support or increase it. Conservatives, like I say, need to run in a big vision of reform. They can't just sit there and say, we're the government in waiting. When the liberals implode, we will take over. They may not implode. Carney is at least smart enough to probably not implode the way Trudeau. Trudeau was both stupid and an ideologue, so he had no ability to pivot. Is Carney an ideologue? Yes, but he's smart. Stephen Guilbeault is a stupid ideologue, for another example. Melanie Joly is a stupid ideologue. Sean Fraser's just stupid. I don't think he's an ideologue. But Carney's at least smart enough that he might be able to pivot and give enough kind of, little policy reforms here and there that the average Canadian who wasn't that badly off is going to say, look, everything's so much better than when Trudeau was prime minister. Because frankly, it's not that hard to do better than Trudeau. And a lot of those people maybe stick with Trudeau unless the Conservatives come up with a really big plan, a big audacious plan to cut taxes 20% across the board, slash regulations 30%. We want regulations to be 30% fewer after a 4-year term. Then you're talking with people. You start running on big social and cultural issues too, slash immigration by 75% for 5 years, 10 years straight. You could actually get a lot of people to show up. K1RIN or Kieran for $2 says it is Parliament still going on vacation. Crisis, by the way. Yeah, so Parliament just went on vacation on the 20th. Oddly, we were in a crisis that Carney needed to lead us through and pass regulations to solve or pass new legislation to solve. And we are on vacation and there's no budget yet. That is one area where the Conservatives should keep drilling on them. There's no, really, we're not going to stick it out for the summer. We're just going to pack our bags and do nothing. I thought we needed to implement your plan. Damage142 says, do you think Carney's goal is for us to join the EU? I don't really think so. I don't really think that's really... I don't think that he's going to do that, although he keeps making these dumb comments about we're the most European, non-European country. It's like, sure, although actually I'd probably say that's more like New Zealand or Australia. They're far more like the UK than Canada is. We're more like the US, frankly. Linda Key says, I sent one BC a donation of $500. I exited the fake BC Conservative Party. Fantastic, Linda. And again, it's such a tick-off. Do you know that there were people in the BC Conservative Party executive in terms of executive level campaign roles, in terms of, campaign directors and campaign advisors and whatnot, who got $177,000 bonuses at the end of the election after they didn't even win, and it was a winnable election. I hate the stupid line, oh, we went from 2% to 44%. That was a lot of progress. It's like, yeah, it's almost like you became the de facto opposition party, which meant a bunch of support went over to you, mostly because the BCU just died. They just voluntarily took a dirt nap and you inherited all of that. It was winnable, and they decided not to win. That party has only 19,000 people following their Facebook page, the BC Conservatives. And somehow, I know that one of the vendors that they hired to do social media, like promotion and content creation and ad management, they were basically paid at least $250,000. And how are they paid $250,000? And somehow the Conservative Party still only has 19,000 people following their main Facebook page, because money was wasted all over the place. So why would you ever donate to people wasting money? The BC Conservatives are currently in, or at least last when they reported their current financial position, $5.3 million in debt because they spent money in all the wrong places. And it definitely wasn't spent on me. I when I was working for them, took very little money and I didn't bill very much. But yeah, thank you for that, Linda. Dingo says, "Hey Wyatt, great job. Did Pierre hire you to help his campaign yet?" Definitely not. I think somebody would try and assassinate him if I was hired. Certain people in the party don't like me, even though most people do. But whatever. I can't change Jenny Burns' mind about me. Although I think that she should be fired, so I guess she shouldn't want me hired because I would keep advising that they fire her because she's bad at her job. Leaf Busby says for $2, how do parties vet MLAs to know they are agree with the values? I would say the biggest way you do it is have a nomination, have a real nomination to make sure that people like they have to go and prove to members that they are that person that they say they are. I find fakes tend to expose themselves in the long run. And if you force them into a nomination, there's a good chance they're going to expose themselves. Not everyone, but a lot of them will expose themselves. So that's why appointed candidates as a general rule isn't smart. And yeah, Linda Key says the US is not our enemy. Absolutely they are not our enemy. And like I'm gonna make a video tomorrow going over all the liberals, NDP, Liberal Party people, leftists in general, whining at Donald Trump for hitting the Iranians. It's a terror state. What do you? Oh, it's World War III. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's taking the nuclear weapons away from Islamic Nazis. We are not going to let Islamic Nazis have a nuclear weapon. My goodness. And people are like, "Oh my goodness, this is a pro. He's trying to start a World War III. Stop it." Cass says politics is your paper. You remind me of Dwight Schrute in the best ways possible. They're in high school. Kids in lower grades thought my name was actually Dwight because so many kids in my class called me that. Whiskey Kyle 10800 says, "What are you thinking about the Iran-Israel U.S. ceasefire?" Well, I think the Iranians basically had to cease fire because there's nothing left for them to fire. They got absolutely embarrassed, and so yeah, I think that's really it. I think so many people in the West saying, "Oh my goodness, Trump's terrible for wanting World War III." This is not World War III. Trump stopped World War III by not letting crazy people from having a nuclear weapon. Oh, why is Israel allowed to have a nuclear weapon and Iran isn't? Because they're a Western democracy who doesn't want to vaporize people to earn points in heaven. That's why they're allowed to have a nuclear weapon because they're not zealots. Iran is run by Islamic zealots, so they shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. So that's simple. Tom Marazzo was saying that a man who was part of the military. There's a reason why I call the man Hurt Locker Tom. The guy thinks he's like a hardcore vet. He worked like in accounting or whatever in a military base in Canada. Happy he served for the Canadian military, but the man pretends like he's an expert on military policy now, and it's like he's just not. He's just he's just like regurgitating things that like Tucker Carlson is saying, and Tucker was 100% wrong on all this stuff. Yab sends in 99 cents. Thank you for that, man. Stop pronouncing nuclear. I nuclear. I think I'm saying it right. Nuclear. Uh. Anyway, so I'm gonna go back to the results now for the by-elections. So now, okay, now we really have votes coming in. NDP in Ellerslie has 1,494 votes, and then the UCP has 1,049. Republican Party of Alberta has 122 votes, which is hilarious because they were literally paying like half a dozen or a dozen door knockers in that riding to go around for them. Strathcona, obviously, Nenchi's winning. That's the second line. So first line is Ellerslie, second line is Strathcona, third line down is Old Didsbury, Three Hills. In that one, the Republican Party of Alberta is in second place. I'm not sure what their ratio is right now. Again, I'm not fantastic at math. I'm just adding this all up so I can see what the portion of the vote is for the Republican Party. 6914. The Republican Party currently has 17% of the vote in Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills. This is a result where I think the UCP can say that they've basically defeated the Republicans. At the same time, Cam Davies and the Republicans will say, see, we have 17% support. It's a great first showing. I would say probably not. This is not a good result for the Republican Party of Alberta. I'm not. Here's my thing. Am I a separatist or an independence guy? No, I'm not. The Zappa says also Calgary, not Calgary. Or here, I live in. I'm a Calgarian by definition. My pronunciation is native because I'm a native Calgarian. Why are people? It's Calgary, Calgary. I just say it however I do. I'm sorry, guys. I have an accent, and that accent is called mumbling. But the problem with this result for the Republicans, Alberta Republican Party, is that everyone was saying, look, if you look at some of the polls, separatism or independence is almost 50% popular. It's like 40, not 47 to 53. If a poll was telling you that it was that close, it's not that close. Janet Brown ran a poll. It was like 35, 32% of people are in favor of separatism in Alberta. Other pollsters have come out with stuff like that. Janet Brown is by far the best pollster in Canada. She mostly only does Western Canadian elections in like Saskatchewan and Alberta. But if she tells you something is where the results are, she's probably generally accurate. She does very, very good polling. I've heard her speak in one of my classes during my master's program. I've heard her speak elsewhere. She does live phone polling, online polling. She makes sure to postal code match her polls to make sure she's not just calling people in cities. She makes sure to go out of her way to call people in rural areas, not just small towns, but deep rural areas, acreages, Edmonton, Calgary, making sure downtown Calgary, Calgary suburbs, the Northeast. She does it all. Separatism or independence is not that popular at the moment. Is it unsubstantial? No, it is substantial. 35% of the province is nothing to sneeze at. At the same time, the Republican Party of Alberta has not proved that in a very deep rural area, Olds Three Hills Didsbury or Old Didsbury Three Hills, it couldn't get more than 17% of the support, even though it's in a riding where, in theory, more than 50% of people want independence. They couldn't, as the Independence Party, get independence. That's a problem. Um, I'm trying to find some other stuff going on here. There's a lot of discussion going on in pronunciation. I don't mind people pronunciation policing me. It's at least funny whenever I find out I pronounce something wrong despite living here. A Western 91 says, LMAO, how are there so many NDP in Alberta? What in the world? Um, I would just say, simply put, a lot of progressive people who live in downtown areas who, frankly, don't live in reality. And I'm not saying that like an insulting way, like, oh, you're an idiot, you don't live in reality. I mean, like, they don't live a full life the way other people do. When I say a full life, I would say that in a lot of ways, rural voters live a more full life than I do in a suburban area. And I live a probably more full life than somebody does working in finance or working for the government in a downtown area. As a farmer, you basically run a small business. You usually have a larger family. You probably pay a lot more taxes than other people do. You don't have to live around you don't live in areas where you expect the government to do stuff for you. So you naturally vote conservative because you don't want the government to do unnecessary things. When you live downtown and you are right up against where all the government services are, and you have, you get the benefit of all the taxes being paid more than anyone else, you're way more likely to vote for the government, especially if you work for the government. And that's why we have a lot of NDP in Alberta. Edmonton is a government city, so they get a lot of government voters out there, and they have a lot of the benefits around there, so people vote for the benefits. And there is a kind of a more, frankly, working class welfare culture in Edmonton where people will vote for higher EI payments and stuff like that when it comes to government employees and people wanting more the government to just do more stuff in general. Simple Mind says, hey, Wyatt, what do you think about Andrew Scheer? He's awesome. I generally like Andrew Scheer pretty well. If I was to name my favorite SoCon from Saskatchewan, it would probably be former MP Brad Trost from Saskatchewan University. I think he's really good. GMAX says, Wyatt would be a great advisor for Pierre. Well, the thing is, I kind of doubt myself every once in a while. Like, am I wrong? Am I just being naive and idealistic? But most of the time, it's like I kind of end up in these like I told you so positions, and I'm not trying to be a dweeb or anything about it, being like, oh, I was actually right about this. And oftentimes it's not like I'm giving like insane insights that you guys wouldn't come up with. You probably also would think the same things as me. But the problem within parties is that there becomes a culture around people who work on campaign after campaign that they start to like internalize certain insane biases about how politics works. And I think that you need more outsiders to join campaigns so they can tell you like, guys, that's not how people are going to react online, or that's not how people at the doors are going to react. And I know someone like Jenny Byrne, I've heard she famously actually likes to do door knocking in ridings that are like the swing ridings to figure out what people think. I've just never seen any of that knowledge translate to her decision making. The nominations were one of the biggest screw ups of the Conservative campaign in 2025. They were basically propping up bad candidates in nominations, and they were appointing people. When you appoint so many bad candidates, you can't be shocked when people start losing. Okay, we're going keep going through here. And then Valve says, which ridings is the by-election? This is the Alberta provincial election, Alberta ridings of Edmonton, Ellerslie, Edmonton, Strathcona, and Old Didsbury Three Hills. So when you see this, remember Ellerslie is on top, Strathcona, and then Didsbury on the bottom. We have now with 39 out of 55, the NDP at 1,912, and the UCP at 1399. I assume the NDP are now going to win that one. And then we have 1376 for the Republican Party of Alberta in Old Didsbury Three Hills, and they are a little bit ahead of the NDP. Of course, the UCP cleaning up in that riding. And then you also have the Wild Rose Loyalty Coalition getting their 104 votes. My goodness. The Liberal Party actually is not doing too bad in the first two elections. A lot of the Liberal Party provincially borderline doesn't exist, but what you end up getting is a lot of people will you get a lot of people who will just vote for for whatever they recognize. So you'll do a lot of so you'll have a lot of people vote for like Liberal because they voted Liberal federally, even though it's not really it's not an actual party on a provincial level. Pro Nintendo Gamer says, what's your opinion on Dan Williams? I believe he was part of the recent cabinet shuffle. I think he went up. I think he went up overall. And yeah, I like Dan Williams. He had a really good pro-life bill that when shameless plug, even though I can't plug it anymore because I wasn't allowed to run. But when I ran in Calgary Signal Hill, here's my old campaign lit for Calgary Signal Hill. I was running against Jeremy Nixon for that, who the party obviously favored for that riding, and I ended up beating him effectively in the sense I was kicked out of the nomination. They were obviously trying to favor Jeremy Nixon to the point there was somebody from Jenny Byrne and Associates lobby firm working on his campaign, like volunteering for him. So obviously Jenny didn't dislike the man, because if you're an employee of Jenny, would you take a chance to go door knocking with somebody that she didn't want to win? You're probably, and because anyone can make an excuse, oh, I can't come door knocking with you, I'm busy, I got to curl my hair. They obviously wanted him to win. They kicked me out. They also kicked out a former MLA and actually the former deputy premier of the province from that race, Leela Ahere. And I mobilized all my people and got Leela to also mobilize her people to vote down ballot against Jeremy. And then this guy, David McKenzie, is now the MP of Signal Hill instead of Jeremy Nixon. But Jeremy opposed and shot down one of Dan Williams's pro-life private members bills in Alberta to basically instantiate conscience rights in the law, that if you're a doctor and you don't want to go along with you don't want to even recommend who to go to for an abortion or for medical assistance in dying or for trans surgery, you don't have to do it. It's your conscience. You don't have to participate in any way. Jeremy argued against that, saying, I think that conscience rights are a good thing, but we also have to value non-discriminatory access to healthcare. And it's like, Jeremy, baby, what do you think conscience rights are? It is the ability to discriminate on what your conscience will allow you to do and not allow you to do. What are you talking about? So that was obnoxious. Mega Mug says, "Do you have an opinion on Shuv Majumdar?" I always call him Shavloy Majumdar because that's his actual first name, fully spelled out Shavloy. I think he's a good MP. I think he's a really great. I'd especially really agree with Shuv on foreign policy. We'd be more hawkish overall. More in favor of things like Trump hitting the Iranian nuclear sites with bombs. Because if you actually want peace in the world, sometimes you got to hit people really, really, really hard. And Anita K or Anna K, do you think we'll have another federal election in less than 2 years? I hope Carney can't do too much damage. And that's the one thing you're going to have to brace for is Carney may even improve certain things because it's hard to do worse than Trudeau. Will Carney be worse than Trudeau in certain aspects? Absolutely. But for the average voter, they only see better or worse. So if he's better than Trudeau, you'll have a lot of people actually firm up their support for him. So in a weird way, it's worse for the country in the long run if he's not that bad compared to Trudeau, because people will be like, oh my goodness, he's getting better. Vote him back in. Even though he's like, Trudeau was like way down here. This is like where we should be at, like where like normal life was 20 years ago. Trudeau was right here. And now Carney is going to be here. And people are like, oh my goodness, that was like a 100% improvement. Even though Polyev would take us like this, and this is where we should be at. Polyev would probably take us back to like there within 4 terms. But people are like, oh my goodness, we went from there to there. That was fantastic, and vote for him again. So that's where, again, the Conservatives need to run on something audacious and say we shouldn't accept bare minimum improvements. We should want big improvements. We should want to outcompete the U.S. Not because we don't like the U.S., because Canadian and American strength comes from our mutual competition, trying to outcompete the one another in friendly competition. I think that would be good. Damage 142 says, oh, I think you already answered these. I'm trying to go through some of these ones I might have missed. Kieran for $2 says Iran said it was a peaceful nuclear program. Yeah, it was just because they needed nuclear energy, even though they had what was it called? It's something about like taking your nuclear material or whatever and like whatever like. I forget what it's called, but like they were way, way over. What is that? I need to look that up again. It's uranium enrichment. So they had their uranium enrichment at 60%, which is like nuclear weapon territory. Civilian power requirement is 3%. Medical grade is 6%. So like things for like CAT scans and MRIs where you need using radiation in medical context, you need 3% enrichment. Again, for nuclear power, for a city, you need 3%. It's 60%. And so they're saying it's peaceful. And they're also an oil and gas superpower in the region. Why do they need it for energy? They obviously did not. So I absolutely support Trump hitting them as hard as possible. Frank Rue for $5 says, Republican Party of Alberta votes support for independence. Lots of pro-independence people would vote yes, but do not like the RPA. It's controversial among separatists. And yeah, and that also is the problem. You get a lot of people in separatist world who start new parties, but are not the type of people who should be leading a party, which ends up splitting everyone up a lot. That's the problem, is that there's never been an agreed upon vehicle for separatism. There is the Alberta Prosperity, the APP, Alberta Prosperity Project, that has a decent amount of popularity, a large amount of data. But even then, they're very pro-UCP in general. So I think you're going to have a lot of pro-independence people upset when the APP probably ends up softly, indirectly backing Danielle Smith in the next provincial election while she's running on a non-separatist agenda. Yab says, for $2.79, thank you for that. What do you think of the recent Nanos polls? I think that it demonstrates that right now Carney is in a honeymoon period, and the Conservatives really got to start getting some attention for themselves. Right now, Carney is gaining a lot of attention. He had the King show up for opening Parliament. He had the G7. He's engaged in negotiations with the Trump administration. He's passed some legislation. So naturally, he's going to be going up. People are going to be looking at him as the guy who's getting stuff done. The Conservatives need to firm up their opposition. They just voted for the Liberals on Bill C-5. I actually am fine with that. Bill C-5 is a dumb piece of legislation that's probably not going to change much of anything. But if the Conservatives voted against it and it was defeated because the Bloc and the NDP were also voting against it, Carney could have then sat there and says, I wanted to get stuff done with my Getting Stuff Done Act, but they didn't vote for it. Let the Liberals have enough line to show that they're not really serious on getting pipelines and mines and oil and gas projects constructed by giving them the legislation that supposedly enables them to do it and showing that they actually have no intention of doing anything. And if they actually do end up doing stuff with it and they actually end up approving mines and pipelines, hey, I'm not going to complain. I don't like the team that passed it. At the same time, if they get it done, that's fine with me. But again, the Conservatives cannot look like they are blindly opposing when I don't like the legislation. It's selectively allowing projects to be fast-tracked. I think they should just do overall deregulation. But the Conservatives can't vote no against that because the narrative will just be that they voted to not get projects done. So it's a bit of a rock and a hard place for the Conservatives, but I think voting for it's probably the right move. Toolshed76 says, do you think the EV ban will actually happen, or the gas ban? Technology seems to be passing EVs by, i.e. hydrogen engines and synthetic engine fuels. Maybe, again, my position on the gas car ban in 2035 is that don't tell people what fuel to use. Most emission reductions have been gotten through capitalism making things more efficient over time. Trying to get everyone to drive EVs is silly, especially in Canada. It's bad in the West. Maybe you could get away with it in the lower mainland, in British Columbia, or on the island, or in the Maritimes. But overall, people should drive what they want. I don't care if people want an EV, but I shouldn't have to subsidize it. People can drive a gas car. I shouldn't have to subsidize it, and nor has any of the gas-powered cars been ever subsidized in Canada, or at least for a very long time. Leaf Busby for $5 says, I work in public service. Canada's housing, hospital and cost crisis stems from a system stretched by bad immigration policy. Fixing it would be huge. And again, that's also another aspect. So we have massive administration bloat where in BC, for instance, 40% of people who work in administration, HR, and management are registered nurses who, if we eliminated many of their silly make work positions, like just bureaucratic nonsense positions, they would just go back to front lines. And if we shifted more money towards front lines, a lot more people would be willing to work front lines. And then also, yes, if you cut immigration, you won't have a system where people, because they don't really understand how the healthcare system is meant to be used, who line up for every little like slight ailment that they should just stay at home for. Like you have the cold, don't go in the hospital. We are heavily overburdening the system with too much immigration, too many people who take from the system and do not actually put into the system. But yeah, thank you for that input, Leaf Busby. And Damage142 for $2 says, Iran already broke the ceasefire, 4 waves fired. Was that just now? If that's just now, good luck, guys, surviving the next 20 years, or not even 20 years, what am I saying? Next 2 years, the Iranian regime might get taken down by its own people if they want to have peace in their country. Now we're getting back to the by-election results. Again, top line is Ellerslie, middle line is Strathcona, and bottom line is Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills. So now the Republican Party of Alberta, and this is probably smaller towns being counted where the NDP do better rather than the rural areas. The NDP are now in second place. Republican Party of Alberta have slipped into third. UCP obviously leading with 7,219 votes. And yes, I think obviously the NDP have now basically won Ellerslie, but this is actually a pretty good margin when it comes to for the UCP. Obviously, their margin may have been better if the Republican Party didn't run, but at the same time, you can't really blame people. Actually, I just got a message from somebody. The actual ceasefire doesn't start for another 2 hours. It's one of these weird things. It's like when World War I was stopping. They basically all agreed, okay, we're going to stop at the 11th, on the 11th month, on the 11th day, at the 11th hour, this war is over. But that meant that people kept firing up until that hour. So Israel's just going around knocking out as many things as possible right now. Yeah. So thank you, Jonathan Gould, for saying that. BJ McGraw says these by-elections changed nothing. Big surprise. They actually did change something in the sense that what we assumed could be happening is not going to happen, and somewhere like Edmonton Ellerslie, at the very least, is tightening up compared to where it has been previously. So, like I'm going to try and add up all that's going on in Edmonton Ellerslie. Uh, I was just looking up. So right now the UCP is only at 37% in Edmonton Ellerslie, which is effectively no change from the previous election, but the NDP has actually fallen in its percentage of the vote as well. Yeah, so the Zappa says why it looks like these results trend with general election 2023 results. Can you check the percentage share tonight versus 2023? I'm also going to compare the NDPs in Edmonton Ellerslie right now. So they're at 51% where they were previously at 61%. So they've fallen by 10% in Edmonton Ellerslie, but all the votes aren't counted yet. So we'll see as this goes on. Third Tooth says, Wyatt, I love you, brother, but you keep making these overly optimistic predictions for elections. Granted, you were pretty close for the BC election, but it's killing me. To be fair, in BC and federally in Canada, I never said this team is going to win. In BC, I even said in the week leading up, I would say coin toss, or I think on an election day, I said 75% shot the BC Conservatives are going to win. That one was such a nail biter. I don't think that one can be considered me being wrong, considering that it's like one, the NDP may have won because of voter fraud in one riding, and then in the other ridings, it was like separated by like 43 votes, 100 votes. That's like, did the party call through its lists well enough to get people out to vote? That's something like you couldn't predict. And then federally, I said it was a coin toss on who was going to win a minority government, which was basically true. Even the federal Conservatives only lost. They would have won the minority government if they gained 8,300 votes in the ridings that they lost by the closest margin. So if the federal Conservatives gained a half a percent more, or even just a third of a percent more, they probably end up winning some of those ridings. And this gets either extremely close with the Liberals barely winning a minority, or the Conservatives could have won a minority. Black's X Skull 101 says, Why didn't I see anything about where to vote for this? I would have definitely been there. Feel bad now. Well, was the by election in your riding, though? The by election is only in some areas. Marty Pitt says, Wyatt, you lie a lot. What are you talking about? What have I lied about? People seem to put words in my mouth where I'll be optimistic about something happening, and I'll still give I'll even say it's not guaranteed, but I give an edge to this, or I think this is the ratio of chance that this happens or this happens. And then someone will only hear the Conservatives can win, and that translates to the Conservatives are 100% going to win, when I've literally never said anything close to that. In fact, even during the election, I was pretty open about certain things about the campaign I didn't like. Obviously, it wasn't the time to start fragging your own people and saying, I don't like this and I don't like that in every video. But I'd point out they need to do this a little more and whatnot. But then people will say, like, oh my goodness, you said they were going to win and you were pumping them up and then they didn't. I'm like, what do you want from me? At the same time, these are the same people who'd like attack me because why are you being negative? Yeah, Mackie Colvin says I worked by election for Edmonton Ellerslie and it wasn't advertised much. That's the problem in by elections in general. They're very low turnout. BCDC 78 says for 279, thank you for that. Next time, bring Brittany. Well, it depends on what she's doing. I don't know. She's not always the biggest live stream person. One thing, video records are there. Okay, well then cite me the thing I was like lying about. I'd be surprised to hear I lied about something. If you're gonna say I'm wrong about something, obviously I could be wrong about something. That's not a lie. My goodness. Anyways, okay. Now we have 51 out of 55 in Ellerslie and 2449 NDP to 1781 UCP. And in Old Didsbury Three Hills, we still have the Republican Party of Alberta behind. I now want to see what this percentage is for the vote. 7320 for the UCP, plus 146 for the Wild Rose Loyalty Coalition, plus 2446 or 2445 for the NDP, plus 2029 for the Republican Party. 11940. And the Republicans currently have 16.9% of the vote in that riding. So that's not amazing for them. Again, they're going to claim this was a big coup, but if you look at their campaign, they were putting a lot of effort into this. And here's the thing, I will never fault people for trying. At the same time, I don't think the Republican Party of Alberta has thought this through enough. Even the leader admitted, Cam Davies said, people get confused and they're thinking, "Are you in the wrong country because we don't have a Republican Party?" Like, no, no, we do, and we mean Republican by we want a republic. They probably should have just been called Independent Alberta or something like that. I know there's already an Alberta Independence Party, but this is the problem with the separatist movement. There's like 5 separatist parties: Wild Rose Loyalty Coalition, Independence Party of Alberta. I think there's like Western Canadian Concept still exists, and like Republican Party. It's kind of silly. And Spoon of Nutella for $5. Thank you for that. Says more realistic thing couldn't have been said by Polyev in the campaign. Maybe he was too transparent. More realistic things couldn't have been said by Polyev. I don't think Polyev did a bad campaign. In fact, Polyev was the big, like, he's a big asset for the party. Very charismatic. People like him. He gets attention on issues. I think it's more so the back office of the campaign let him down. I heard within the first week of the campaign, the HQ of the party campaign was not even properly staffed up yet because there was too many just futzing around in the back, people like only hiring friends and whatnot, and it was just dragging the whole campaign. Polyev was doing a good job. I think that they advised him to go mild on too many things, saying just hold it out here, keep it, just keep it consistent, don't say anything controversial. And it's like you got to say something controversial. You got to rip the attention away from Carney, and you got to be the star of the show. That's what you have to do. And then also the campaigns from HQ were micromanaging the riding level campaigns. I've heard, and I've confirmed this with my friend Scott Hayward from the organization right now, that candidates were told that they are not allowed to leave their riding boundaries outside of about 5 people. 5 people were allowed to go where they wanted. Anyone else was basically banned unless you got express written permission that you could leave your riding to go help out in another riding, which is stupid because some of these people are in super safe ridings and they could go down the street to go help out a non-safe riding or a liberal riding that we could flip, but they weren't allowed to do it. Or if you were a candidate, you weren't allowed to go to events without getting written permission. You weren't allowed to go and meet community leaders. You weren't allowed to go to the local debates. And guess what? A lot of the candidates who ended up winning close ridings ignored HQ and did whatever they wanted. But the problem is a lot of people won't think that because they're thinking that they would have gotten kicked out if they started doing their own thing. And maybe they did run the risk of getting kicked if they defied orders, but they took the risk, defied orders, took risks on the ground, and they won, which demonstrates risks help. And Third Tooth was mentioning about can you blame me though for kind of taking more optimistic interpretations of what I was saying away. I don't blame you for that, absolutely. Obviously, I keep the show more positive because it would be pathetic to do a show where I'm like, bad things could happen. I don't want it to be like the hope for the best, expect the worst kind of a show. I think that it should be more focused on here's the path to victory, here's what we need to do to get that path to victory, and it's absolutely realistic. I can't control the campaigns. So when I'm saying this is the path to victory, and they start going on another path that there's not a victory at the end of the road for, like I can't do anything about that. Not that anyone is saying that I can, obviously. Rotten says, "Good thing you don't have the riding names on your screen. Lol, worst election coverage ever." Okay, well, do you want me to have them on screen? Because this is what it would look like, Rotten. You can't see anything now. This is why I don't have them on screen. It is extremely tiny because the Elections Alberta website is not designed for people streaming the election results. But yeah, top line is Ellerslie, middle line is Strathcona, third line is Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills. So there you go. Hopefully that is satisfactory to you. And no, this is not the Crowfoot election with Polyev. That's not going to probably be until early or mid April because, of course, there's a mandatory amount of time for the election. And we didn't have Damien Kirk step down as that riding's MP until basically the end of session because there was no chance that Polyev was going to be able to be included in that session. There wasn't enough time within that session for him to get elected and show up. So I think they let Damien Kirk serve out at least until the end of spring session. Then he stepped down. And Damien Kirk, by the way, who's a great MP, he's actually going to be coming back in the next election. JJMK says, Wyatt, ignore those haters. I love your channel. I don't really get bothered by people. If anything, I kind of find it fun when people don't like what I'm doing. It gives me something to chew on. And Scotty was saying that's Jenny's fault, and I assume that you're talking about a lot of the election mistakes was Jenny Burns' fault, and that's absolutely true. Wyatt has nearly as many viewers on YouTube as Rebel News coverage, FYI. Well, that's sad for them. They probably are doing a better job than me. I like Rebel. Especially Drea Humphrey's been doing a really, really good job covering the scandal of the AGM in British Columbia. I should actually bring that up. There's gonna be a part 2, but John Rusted recently put out this like long rambling letter to his voters to basically justify what happened at the and pretending nothing bad happened. And I'll link the video for you guys here if you guys want to go check out the Drea Humphrey report. It's really great. I'll just spam it into chat a couple times. But here's the thing. John claims that you can't, because the thing is that they were kicking people out of the AGM. If you applied to be a member, if they seemingly didn't think that you were going to vote for John Slate, or they knew some people are obviously going to vote against John Slate and they're going to vote for the independent board member candidates because they wanted more accountability, transparency, more respect to the grassroots. They let a bunch of those people in, but it was obviously that they probably had a ledger in the back where they knew how many people were on their side and how many people were against them. And if you were against them and you were applying to be a delegate and they wanted to keep the ratio of people against them down, they were either not letting you know whether you were delegate or not, and you lived so far away you didn't even bother showing up because you had no confirmation that you were supposed to show up, or they were just saying that you've been denied as a delegate, even though some of these people were literally nominated by their ridings to show up and be a delegate. John denied that he did that. And his evidence that he didn't do that and he's actually super popular is that his slate won, which is the definition of begging the question. Well, obviously, I didn't rig the AGM to make myself seem popular because I won the AGM, and that means I was super popular. It's like, what is wrong with you? That is the worst defense I've ever heard in my life. Canada Bud 23 says Carney isn't conservative. And obviously, he's not a conservative. And I would say that when Winter says Carney is conservative with brains, I disagree with that. But I understand the sentiment that Carney is conservative compared to Trudeau, like a more conservative liberal in his temperament, which is maybe why he may be more formidable as a prime minister to go up against than Trudeau was, although Trudeau still ended up winning 3 elections, so you can't really say he's not formidable. But right now, in this moment in time, I could see it being more difficult to beat Carney than Trudeau because Carney gives off an attitude that he is here to stabilize the country. Just as Trudeau was hard to beat when he first came in, because you could say that Harper's government had become more, I don't dislike Harper, but you could say it was sluggish. It felt boring. And Trudeau, at a time when things were good and people had, I guess, the luxury to vote in silly ways because everything was going well, because of in many cases because of Harper's policies, that what you ended up having was a lot of people voted for Trudeau because they wanted some excitement. And so at the time in 2015, 2019, and then 2021 was more of a COVID thing. But in 2015, 2019, Trudeau had energy and he had charisma and style, and you had people who were, fat and happy, so they'll vote for that. And then as the hangover started like setting in over Trudeau's government, a lot of people didn't want him around anymore, understandably. And then people now want the steady, sober-minded view of Carney, even though in many ways he's a lot like Trudeau. But again, so many people vote on vibes, which is very concerning and sad. Um, GMAX says Carney admires Marxism, lol, which is, yeah, like he actually does basically plug Marx in his own book. Canada Bud 23 says, yeah, he gives that the illusion, which is the illusion of competence, but he hasn't done anything for us yet. He has passed some legislation and he has done things that aesthetically will make Canadians happy about the G7 and whatnot. His new Major Projects Act, if he actually starts doing it, using it to promote new projects or to get new projects going, he is going to get some policy wins off of that. So far, he hasn't done anything with it. The Conservatives have called his bluff by voting in favor of it, saying, okay, you have the powers now to speed up projects. Now go speed up projects. And if he doesn't actually approve mines and oil and gas projects or the National Energy Corridor for oil and gas products, that's going to hurt him. That's really going to hurt him because it's going to prove that he's lying. Mark H says for $6.99, thank you for that. Do you think the men of Alzut will cross the Diddy line in the next federal election? I don't know what that means at all. Do you think? I don't even know what that means. You're gonna have to fill me in on what that means, Mark. I will await the thing, your explanation. GMAX says I'm out of here. Too depressing. There's nothing really depressing about what's going on here. This is pretty standard election results for Alberta, but you see the NDP kind of weakening. Oh, that's actually an interesting thing to bring up. Air India terror attack. Kind of surprised that Ipsos poll shows that 9 out of 10 Canadians didn't know of it. It was 17% who knew it was Canada's biggest terror attack. But yeah, that's crazy just how undereducated a lot of Canadians are, that people don't even know what the biggest terror attack in Canadian history is. Anna Kay says, I just watched the Rob Ford documentary on Netflix, so wild. I'll probably end up watching that at some point. Of course, Doug Ford doesn't like it, but at the end of the day, the one thing I could see the documentary not capturing is how much people actually really liked Rob Ford, because Rob Ford was actually a good mayor. Tom Duke says, no way they will change that EV mandate. On the contrary, they feel it's totally justified. The one problem, though, or the one thing about it, is that the Liberals always put their big goals for like climate stuff out 20 years or 15 years. And it's always something like this one's 10 years away. I think they committed to it like 5 years ago in 2020. It's always something far enough away where their government might not survive that long and it will get basically trashed by the next government. And so they get to run on the idea that they want to do it, but they never actually have to do it. J-Man 2 says Air India was like 40 years ago. Well, and that's why it's not that old of an attack. And the problem is we don't even talk about that in schools. And that's how a lot of Khalistani nutcases get to go around pretending that they represent the Sikh community, because nobody actually informs Canadians. The Sikh community doesn't even they don't even like these people. The Cat in the Hat says that crazy Rob Ford rant was about me and our charity boxing match. It started on Twitter. Did I see what? Did you go on a rant? Well, I'll go find that later. Lena Key says Rob Ford, who I really like, is on video saying my brother is a commie. Well, he'd refer to his brother as a pinko, at least behind the scenes. Have we had any more progress on the by-election results? Not really. Okay, there's a lot more to go in Old Didsbury Three Hill. So that election got way more attention than the other ones, considering how many like votes there are in that one comparatively, and there was still way less counted. 46 out of 60 poll stations counted, where all the other ones are far more counted, and there's more votes in the other one. So I guess like maybe the separatist running got a lot more people out to vote because they wanted to demonstrate that they didn't support the Republicans. But again, a third place finish for them in this riding is just bad, considering that, again, I know a lot of people who support separatism still support the UCP. But if you're in Old Didsbury Three Hills and you're coming in third place as the Republicans in an area where, in theory, well more than a majority of people would vote for separatism or for independence, that's not good. If you're being beaten by the progressive trade unionist party out there. But yeah. Oh my goodness. Chris Johnson says, I'm genuinely curious. What is the draw to the left in this extreme? Why I don't get it. Do we see this crazy? Do we seem this crazy to the left as they seem to us? Honest question. Well, I think the left will always highlight actual nut jobs on the right to pretend that that's what most conservatives are. And you get conservatives who pretend every person who's a liberal or NDP supporter is that hyper progressive downtown activist, and it's inaccurate. I would say extremism is far more common on the left. Yeah, you get extreme nutcases on the right too, but I find that the amount of leftists who think that we should just, do away with landlords, or that basically certain companies should be nationalized, or that we should cut off diplomatic ties with the US because Trump sucks, that's far greater than you'll ever find stuff on the right. I find you get a lot of loud people on the right who are extreme, and they're not even usually on the right. It's like Jeremy McKenzie and the Diagolon guys. They're not even on the right. Look at their actual individual policy stances. Being racist is not right wing. Being like anti-Semitic is not right wing. Those are just like gross attitudes. Uh, when you actually look at those guys' policies, yeah, sometimes they're more like small government, but a lot of those guys are like big government, like people who they're like woke right in the sense they believe the government should be super big to do things they like, which is not what an actual person on the right should believe. But yeah, like, and as someone people are bringing up the EV mandates again. The problem with the EV mandates too, the biggest problem, not only should we not be subsidizing like the car purchases of individual people because it's lower emissions, the main problem is that like we also don't have grid space for all these chargers. One, there's not enough charging infrastructure out there. Two, we do not have grids that were made to handle people not only getting electricity for their homes, but their cars as well. Charging a car is more than your home is going to use in a few days. If you're charging a car from 0 to 100, your car is not going to be able to like the grid cannot handle that. Like doubling grid usage across the city from everyone having two EVs and their house is insane, and obviously we should not be doing that at all. Do we have any more results? Come on, guys. You can do it. This is maybe as far as we're gonna go because it doesn't look like we're really gonna get too many more. Um, it looks like it's kind of stalling out a little bit, but I think this is generally where we're probably gonna see the results settle out. The UCP basically maintained their vote in Ellerslie at 36%, disappointing. Although the Liberals running and the Alberta Party running ended up causing the NDP to fall down by 10% of the vote there. And then the Republican Party had what I would consider pretty disappointing start for their party in the riding where they chunked all they put most of the resources into. Coming third place is nothing to sneeze at, but considering that this should be prime ground for them to potentially give the UCP a run for their money, I don't think this is a good result at all. So yeah, uh, DC Frank says hubris and greed have finally taken their toll. I mean, the last 10 years, as well as the last election, would have not happened if greed and hubris were stopped or slapped down as they should be. Absolutely. Well, I think so many people. I think in the last election, what you saw, and it's like if you guys are obviously above the age of 50 watching my show, it's not you guys who are the problem because you guys probably voted conservative. But there are a lot of people who are retired who live comfortably, already own their own home, they live in safe parts of the city, who voted liberal because they don't have to suffer the consequences of the policies. It actually really grosses me out when I go into a it really grosses me out when I go into like a fast food restaurant and it's like only TFW workers. And nobody seems to care. Like a lot of people don't seem to care. It's like, guys, it's like a lot of older people sitting around like McDonald's or Tim Hortons, and it's all TFW employees. It's like, guys, like stop voting liberal. Stop letting your kids' jobs get taken by people who don't have any skin in the game in Canada, who are not going to be here in the long run, or are only working there to basically get a citizenship one day. Stop it. Like the thing is, TFW programs, temporary foreign workers, and permanent residents immigrating to your country to add to the population and foreign students, that should be supplementary. But it has become like the main way for employers to get employees. It's become the main way for universities to generate dollars. It's become the main way for us to add to our population. It's ridiculous. And this is the pro-life point I'll make. Everyone who's saying like, don't talk about pro-life stuff, it's not very popular. One, it's far more popular than you actually think. Actually, look at the polling on individual practices. If you were to ban them, sex selective abortion is like a 95% prospect. 95% of people would vote to ban it. Many people don't even realize it's even legal. A lot of the stuff you could easily win votes on. But guys, immigration is being justified. Massive amounts of people entering the country every year is being justified in part because of low birth rates, which is not helped when you start eliminating unborn children. Just saying. Just saying. And it would be good to have more of a pro-family culture where people actually, raise their kids. Well, whatever. Maybe I'm being controversial. Oh, hey, Hershey, hearsay, or Heresy YYC. I keep reading it wrong every time I see your name. But Heresy YYC, I think it would be good if for Alberta to have a separatist party with a seat. It would show how close the center to the center the UCP truly is. And yeah, I don't think maybe I don't think the UCP is exactly to the center. It depends on the issue, but I don't think it would be a bad thing for the separatists to have a seat. The problem is that they're just really bad at getting organized. That's the problem. They just are not well organized. There's a reason why Peter Guthrie has not joined, who's one of the independent and MLAs in Alberta. There's a reason why he hasn't joined that party. It's probably because he doesn't believe in it. Patty Elliott sends in $6.99 with no message attached, but thank you, Patty Elliott. Thanks for supporting the show. And Basement Banter says, with the amount of money the West contributes in equalization payments, we deserve equal seats to the East. In general, I actually wouldn't mind the problem is that things are not proportional. If things were proportional, actually Ontario may have an extra seat, but the Maritimes would have less seats. Quebec would have less seats. I think that and that's really if you just sorted out those things, it would be way easier for the Conservatives to win. But we give the Quebec a guaranteed proportion of the seats, and then the like places like PEI, their seats only have like 35,000 people in them each. And Alberta riding has like 136,000 people in them. I believe Ontario ridings have like 142,000. So in theory, they actually deserve more seats. But it is a problem when the average Quebec riding only has like 100,000 or 93,000 people per riding. And if we actually did it proportionately, they would end up losing like 10 ridings or so. I think PEI would go down to a single riding. Nova Scotia would lose 2. New Brunswick would lose 2. Newfoundland would lose 2. That does add up after a while. That's almost the margin of the Liberals' election victory. And then the Conservatives would probably, and then the Alberta would probably go up by 1 even then. Hunter says, didn't even know that this was happening. Good results. The results are just kind of what they are. It's not that different from the 2023 election in Alberta. So I was assuming the UCP could win. Ellerslie, it looks like not as much has changed in Ellerslie, which sucks. the NDP have fallen down because of the presence of the Liberals and of the Alberta Party in that election. But it is still a problem when you end up losing votes in a by-election when it should be very easy to turn out your hardcore supporters as the NDP, and they've gone from 61% of the vote in that riding to 50. Not great for like it's fine for the UCP. Basically, it demonstrates that Danielle Smith probably would win a general election and probably gain seats. If the NDP is struggling in an Edmonton by-election to maintain its vote and losing 10% of its of its portion of the vote, that probably means in Calgary the UCP could probably pick up 1 to 3 more seats. They already had a decent seat margin in the last election. It came close in terms of the actual vote count in Calgary, in terms of the seats that the UCP won that they needed to win. At the same time, with the results going the way they are and the polling going the way they are, I think Danielle Smith and the Conservatives can rest pretty easy. Even with the Republican Party of Alberta running in Ellerslie, it didn't really hurt them that bad. And again, Ellerslie is not a riding they even need in the next general election. And the Republican Party of Alberta, as you see in the bottom, in the rural riding of Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills, did not really do as well as probably they would want to have done. It's about 17%, 16.5% of the vote. It's the proportion of the vote they can pretend that they did really well, even though they put in way too much effort into that by-election to be coming in third place behind the NDP. I think they needed to show that they were a second place party in a rural area where separatist sentiments are the highest. They can't come in third. Actually, I will be on Juno News tomorrow talking about those by-election results with Candace Malcolm, so go check us out there. And Jennifer Varangi, I hope I'm saying that right. Jennifer Varangi says, congratulations on reaching 70,000 followers. I have been watching since at least February when you had 37,000. Well, fantastic. Back when I was nearly only half the size. And by the way, guys, if you're not yet subscribers, make sure to go hit that subscribe button. Again, trying to hit 100,000 by mid-December, or I end up owing all my friends dinner, and I'm fine if I lose. I'll lose fair and square. Well, obviously the channel slowed down a lot since after the election. It's not because people hate my guts or anything, probably. It's just because naturally Canadian political news is not as hot on the algorithm, so naturally everything slumps a little bit, which sucks because most of the people your videos get service to are people who are already subscribers. So naturally subscribers go down over time, or you don't get as many new ones. By the way, guys, also sign up on the website WyattClaypool.com if you want to get on my data list. I want to start recommending in news cycles in the future, election cycles in the future, good candidates in conservative nominations, provincially, federally, in leadership races. I want to do more of that. I wish Wally Daldrich's people in the Manitoba PC leadership would have worked with me more. He only lost by like 43 votes. I was trying to help them. I tried to reach out. They never really ever reached out back to me. I plugged them a bunch of times, but I was never really given away or any indication of like how I should like having him on the show or anything like that. And I wish he would have done it because we could have probably gotten him over the finish line, and I didn't have enough individual data myself to call people, but whatever. So I'm going to try and do that. But some people are saying I should refresh the results on the website. So hopefully once I do that, oh my goodness, thank you for saying that. The results actually are coming in better now. Okay. So now we have Ellerslie with 31,007 votes for the NDP, 23,052 for the UCP, Republican Party in Ellerslie's 220. But we care mostly about the bottom, which is Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills, which is where the Republican Party of Alberta made its debut. They are still in third place in this by-election, which again is not great for them considering that they should want to be in second place in a rural area, but they are behind the NDP, who have gotten only more progressive and obnoxious since Nenshi took over. Well, I'm just calculating the results in that riding, seeing what the Republican Party got as a percentage. Hasn't been fully calculated yet. 14,956. So right now, the Republican Party has 17.5% in that riding. And then I want to see what the UCP currently has as a portion of the Edmonton Ellerslie by election, which is the top line here, only one poll station away from being finished. So I doubt the result rate percentages are going to change much from here. So 282 plus 3107 plus 166 plus 220 plus 2352 plus 31 equals. And so the UCP are at 38% in Ellerslie, so they've at least gone up by 3% since the general election. The NDP have fallen down, I believe, a little bit. Yeah, so the NDP are at 50% of the vote in Ellerslie. Not bad for the UCP, considering the NDP in the last general election in Edmonton Ellerslie was at 61.9%. So not too bad. Someone else was promoting my or justifying my slurring of Calgary because I can't say I guess my own city's name properly. No, the shizzle. This is not the Pierre election. That will probably be sometime in August or so. So that will be. I don't think that one will be as interesting because it will probably be obviously Polyev will probably win. It's a super conservative riding, but again, I criticize Naheed Nenshi, the NDP Alberta leader, because that guy could have run in Ellerslie to prove that, hey, I can take a riding that's not as safe as Strathcona and keep it safe. He ran in the safest of safe ridings. Strathcona, Edmonton Strathcona, was an NDP riding forever. Actually, I should bring that up on screen just for the fun of it. So, do you want, okay, Edmonton Strathcona hasn't been won by anyone but the NDP since 1993, and it was won by a liberal. And so, and it hadn't been won by a conservative since 1982. So that's pretty pathetic. And it's been NDP in every single election previously before the liberal won that one election, and it's been NDP since then. So yeah, it's always been like the leader seat. So that's not, it's pathetic. It's pathetic to consider that any of this like to be like a win for Nenshi. He ran in the easiest place possible. Dallas Wells, I'll bring up the Republican Party. So its bottom is where they're at. That's the. I'll just quickly refresh in case they're done counting. Now, basically, they're getting 17.5%, but the problem is they're coming in third place behind the UCP. And again, I think they should be doing better than that if they want to prove that they're here to stay. But yeah, so I'll be on with Candace Malcolm tomorrow. Every once in a while, I almost call her Candace Owens, but it's just because she's a very big Candace in media. So I accidentally, sometimes I almost call Candace Malcolm the evil Candace. But yeah, so I'll be going on with Candace Malcolm to talk about the by-election results on Juno News tomorrow. That should probably be out midday or so. Again, I can probably preview what I already think. Republican Party could be a thorn in the UCP side. In general, the by-election results here show Danielle Smith is pretty formidable still. I would say Nenshi's probably at least stagnating in support for the NDP, if not going down a little bit. And the UCP already had a big seat advantage over the NDP. Again, it was tight when it came to the vote percentage in Calgary, but since Danielle Smith started doing things like cutting taxes and deregulating in certain areas, I think you're going to have a lot of those sort of finance guys in Calgary show back up for the UCP, because I would say that the problem for the UCP in 2023 is on financial issues. They hadn't maybe moved strongly enough to kind of gird up their support in Calgary, which is a very big finance city. I would say Edmonton is a union government worker city. Calgary is a suburban finance city. And then the rural areas are the rural areas. UCP basically wins all the rural areas except for one of the Lethbridge ridings, and that's it. And then they lost Banff, Kananaskis, which they can probably win it back pretty easily this time. The UCP has been doing good work on forests and fighting forest fires and going after the Liberals federally for having done terrible things to the forest management of those like federal lands. And so I think they'll win those back. But with the UCP cutting taxes, they'll get more popular. Frankly, the UCP's biggest asset, other than the fact that the economy is doing pretty well under Danielle Smith relative to the other provinces, is Nenshi a terrible NDP leader. And I'll even admit I was wrong on this. I assumed Nenshi may have actually been more formidable than I assumed. Um, yeah, so I would say that the Edmonton Ellerslie polling shows that maybe and like he's going to be able to hold on to all of Edmonton in the next general election. But I think that Nenshi is going to start losing seats in Calgary, despite being the former mayor. He's just whiny, obnoxious. He comes off like a sensitive know-it-all, and I think that's not going to do very well. It doesn't matter. He used to be popular as Calgary mayor. You got to remember, even as he was leaving as mayor, his popularity was starting to slump. And then the problem is that for Nenshi, he has changed a lot. There's a reason why he started slumping towards the end, because he started becoming the hyper-progressive, BLM, defund the police type of progressive. And so what you're going to probably see is a lot of people saying that that's not the Nenshi I remember, and then voting UCP again, especially if, again, the UCP is making progress on areas of policy that people have been asking for. Because again, in the AGM for the UCP in 2024 in November, I voted no on Danielle Smith's leadership review. I knew she was going to win it, but I voted no to basically signal, guys, you got to deregulate. There's some shakeups you have to make in your government. You got to move faster when it comes to AHS reform. You got to cut taxes. And on a bunch of those things, they started moving faster. They started getting rid of all of the, they started fixing the curriculum in Alberta schools, implementing parental rights legislation faster. Good. They didn't go soft on the parental rights side of things, which is great. My friend MLA Chantal DeYoung was partially in charge of that. She's doing a very good job. Many MLAs, like my MLA, who's the deputy premier, Mike Ellis, is doing a very good job. And I think that's where the UCP has girded up their popularity, while the NDP has just seemed like a party that's only interested in winning people who live in downtown core areas of cities. Saya Cowboy says, what's wrong with Edmonton? It's a union government city. That's just what it is. The UCP could end up winning there, but I think they gotta, I don't even know. Do they have to change tactics? Who knows? So here are the final results now for Old Didsbury Three Hills. I just want to see if anything's changed in terms of the ratios here. 2705 for the Republican Party. So yeah, the Republican Party ends with 17.6% of the vote. And so yeah, that's generally a good improvement overall. So yeah. Well, that's like not an improvement. That's generally like obviously like the Republican Party didn't exist before this, but overall, I'd say that I was looking at Ellerslie, and that's why I said an improvement. It's an improvement for the UCP in a minor way. In Ellerslie, it was more of a fall for the NDP in Ellerslie, but they still held on to it. And I don't think the Republican Party is probably going to be able to justify to their donors that was a good enough performance to keep donating. But overall, I'm not really sure if this is really like great stuff for them. I don't know why they really exist. I understand a lot of people support separatism or independence, however you want to phrase it, but no, I don't think the Republican Party is I don't think it's the vehicle. Adventures in Health and Well-Being says, when are you running? Well, as you know, I did run for the Calgary federal nomination for Calgary Signal Hill. I could always run federal again in maybe Calgary Confederation, which is the next door riding where the Liberals won. It was funny. The guy that they were trying to prop up in my nomination, who they kicked me out to try and help win, was Jeremy Nixon. I moved all my supporters to voting everyone but Jeremy. He lost the nomination, and then he tried to run in Calgary Confederation because the party appointed him into that riding, and then he still lost it. So maybe I'll have to clean up Jeremy's mess and go run there. And then, or I could go run somewhere else. Who knows? I'll try and do something someday. It doesn't mean I'm going to jump for any race that's even nearby me. I don't think that's exactly I don't think that's the right thing to do in politics in general. Don't just run for things for just for the sake of it. You can quickly become a perennial candidate. But yeah, I think that's probably where I'm gonna leave people here. But yeah, so that this is generally where we're keeping the results. NDP fall by 10% in Edmonton Ellerslie. UCP gain 3. Part of this is because the Liberals and the Alberta Party ran, but they didn't really get that many votes. And the UCP still gained 3% despite the Republican Party of Alberta having run a candidate there. Republican Party did 17, came in third in Old Didsbury, Three Hills, which should be a disappointing result for them, but they'll probably spin it as a success. And of course, Nenshi won Edmonton Strathcona, which is in the middle there, but that was obvious. It is the most NDP riding in the entire province. What's the point of this by-election? Well, Rob La Jolla had resigned to run for the Liberals and lost. And so, not lost, but the Liberals originally made them their candidate, and then they kicked him out because he was such a nutcase. And then, so he's now been deprived of a riding completely, which is good because Rob La Jolla was a flat-out communist, like literal communist. And so they need to replace him. And then Rachel Notley had stepped down because naturally when leaders stop being the leader of the party, they don't usually want to stick around as MLAs, especially if they don't really have anything else to do in politics past that point. Her riding and Strathcona need to be replaced. And then Nathan Cooper, who has moved on to be Alberta's envoy to the United States, needed to be replaced in Old Didsbury, Three Hills. So that's why we end up having these. Gord Crawfoot said, would you consider running in 2027 for the UCP? Maybe. Depends on what needs to be done provincially and if I think that I'm a good person to help do that. The problem is in Alberta, the UCP's rules, and I understand why they have them, is that they're pretty strict on you only running in the riding that you live in. And I'm sitting on my UCP board in Calgary West. My MLA is very good, Mike Ellis, and he's not resigning probably. And so if he resigned, maybe I'd run, maybe I wouldn't. I don't really know. You don't want to force yourself into places just because you want to be elected. If your guy is good, don't compete with him. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at right now in terms of that. I'm going to be trying to help out when it comes to Calgary for the mayoral election. By the way, any Calgarians in chat, I'm just going to drop the link to Sonia Sharp's request link for signs. Get yourself a Sonia Sharp for mayor sign because she's probably the most conservative candidate right now who can actually win. Goodness, the other guys pretending to be conservative in the Calgary mayoral election are ticking me up. Jeff Davison literally has a land acknowledgement on his landing page. It's so silly. The man's not that conservative. The man voted for every tax increase when he was on council. That guy should not be mayor. I don't think he can win. They're trying to market around some sort of a poll showing that he's in second or third place with 17% of the vote. The polls for mayoral elections this far out of the election are worthless because not that many people are engaged in the election. So when you poll them on the names, it's just a name recognition test. Even Kamala Harris in DNC primaries, Democratic primaries in the United States, still comes out in first most of the time because nobody knows who else to vote for right now because most people don't know other state senators and Congress people who are putting their names forward or who are being basically just thrown in there to see what people think. Most people don't know who Cory Booker is in the United States. Most people don't know who Pete Buttigieg is. They kind of do, but not really. So when you poll people this late from an election, especially for something that's semi-nonpartisan, like a municipal race, they'll be like, I know who Jeremy Farkas is, and they'll pick him, even though he's not at all conservative anymore. He's a full-on progressive. Anyways, so that's it for me today, guys. Thanks for tuning in for the live stream. Make sure to subscribe if you're not a subscriber yet. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Catch me on Candace Malcolm's show tomorrow talking about these results. And of course, I will have more content coming in the future for my own channel. See you guys later.